Why Silo is hiding an entire second rebellion underground. 50 years of farm lighting is missing from Silo 18. Not misplaced, not miscounted. Gone a little at a time across half a century, and nobody caught it until the numbers finally stopped lining up. That single detail is the quietest bombshell in Silo Season 3, and I don't think the show has told us the real reason for it yet. If you're new here, I've read the Wool trilogy more times than is probably healthy, and I own a corkboard covered in red string that my roommate keeps threatening to throw out. Today, I want to walk you through a theory that ties together three things the show has been treating as separate puzzles: the missing lights, Orla Kent's murder, and the radio walker just got her hands on. Spoilers through episode 6, The Drive, which dropped just a few hours ago as I'm recording this. So if you're behind, this is your moment to pause and catch up. Quick reset for anyone who needs it. Season 3 picks up 3 months after Juliet's rebellion. She comes back through the airlock alive, but with her memory wiped by drugs she never agreed to take. Down in the before times, roughly 350 years earlier, a congressman named Daniel Keene and a journalist named Helen Drew are digging into how humanity ended up underground in the first place. And every thread they pull gets them closer to an answer someone very powerful once buried. Episode 5 handed us 2 gut punches. Bernard did not die in that airlock fire. Sims secretly hid him in the Digger Void and lied to the entire council about his death. And Orla, the supply shadow everyone assumed died in a routine mine fumigation, was actually murdered and moved there afterward to make it look that way. Both of those reveals matter more than they look like they do, and I want to show you why. Let's start with the number that kicked off this whole mess. Silo 18 is missing roughly 50 years worth of critical farm lighting. Carla tells Billings the silo may only have 2 years of working stock left before the crops start failing. Sit with that gap for a second. A single person can steal a relic. A corrupt worker can move 1 crate and fudge 1 record. Nobody quietly walks 50 years of infrastructure out the door in a single shift. A loss that size needs a system behind it. Someone has to know exactly when inventory gets counted. Someone has to know which records can be adjusted without tripping an alarm. Someone has to move the material without it ever looking unusual to the people working around them. And on the receiving end, someone has to actually need that much material consistently for decades. That's not theft. That's a supply chain. And supply chains don't run on one guilty employee. They run on cooperation across departments that may never even meet each other. So who's actually positioned to run something like that? Follow where the missing goods would physically have to travel. Not up through the living levels where every movement gets noticed. Down through the mines, past the boundary the pack draws around how far anyone is allowed to dig. That boundary is the detail I keep circling back to. Ed Harwood, the head of mining, complains at the new council meeting about how restrictive the digging limits are. The official reason is safety. Unstable rock, collapse risk, all reasonable enough on paper. But episode 5 hands us something much bigger. Bernard tells Juliet that all 50 silos answer to a single authority called Silo 1, and that Silo 1 has the power to wipe out any population it decides has become a threat. Once you know that, the digging limit stops looking like a safety rule and starts looking like a border. A vertical silo keeps every population sealed inside its own cylinder. The moment 2 silos connect underground, people can compare notes. They can compare screens, laws, and the story each population has been told about being the last ones left. That is precisely the outcome this entire system was engineered to prevent. Here's where the mines actually get interesting instead of just grim. On the surface, mining reads as a punishment job, somewhere to send people the silo would rather forget about. But that description only holds up if you're looking at one silo in isolation. Turn the map sideways and the mines become the only department whose daily work pushes people toward the outer edge of their assigned cylinder instead of up and down the central staircase. They're the department most likely to physically stumble onto evidence that Silo 18 isn't alone down there. And they're also the department with the tools, the manpower, and the practical know-how to turn that discovery into an actual usable route. If I were building an underground network that officially isn't supposed to exist, I would not be recruiting from IT. I would be recruiting from the people who already know how to dig, shore up a collapsing tunnel, and disappear for a shift without anyone asking too many questions. So why farm lights specifically, out of everything a supply room holds? If this network wanted to arm a rebellion, it would be stealing radios, medicine, or anything that actually goes bang. Lights don't do that. What lights do is make unauthorized space livable. They let people keep working somewhere the official maps insist is empty. They let people grow food somewhere Silo 18's inventory system never accounted for in the first place. One hidden room does not need 50 years of bulbs. A network of tunnels, staging points, and half-abandoned structures very well might. Which brings us to Silo 17, because the show already handed us a working blueprint for what a collapsed silo can quietly become. 17's official record says its society fell apart, its lower levels flooded, and everyone inside died. Except Solo didn't. A handful of children didn't. Pieces of the machinery kept limping along in the dark for years after the official story closed the book. The gap between a silo's paperwork status and what's actually happening inside it turned out to be enormous. My theory is that 17 isn't a special case. It's a preview. If other silos have survived their own rebellions, floods, fires, or failed maintenance, they would have people but no working farm and no safe supply line. A cross-silo network wouldn't need to drain 18 if every silo down there were doing fine. It only makes sense if some silos are thriving while others are quietly dying off the official record, and 18's surplus is being redirected to keep them alive. That also answers the obvious objection to this whole idea. If all 50 silos started around the same time, why would anyone need 18's light specifically? Because time isn't the only thing that burns through inventory. Rebellion does. Flooding does. Fire does. A working farm in one silo can quietly become the only working farm several silos actually have access to. Which brings us to Orla, and why the show confirming her murder in episode 5 is a bigger deal than it first appears. She wasn't killed by the fumigation gas. She was struck down somewhere else entirely and moved into a sealed tunnel so the gas release would provide a convenient cover story and buy time before anyone looked closer. That's not a crime of passion. That's staging, and staging takes planning, mine access, and a fair amount of confidence that nobody upstairs would push past the easy explanation. Orla wasn't some low-level worker quietly skimming for herself. She was new to the department, and she'd started pulling old inventory records that were never meant to get a second look. I don't think she just stumbled onto corruption. I think she stumbled onto a route out of the silo, and she had to be stopped before she could hand the full picture to Juliet or Billings. The show keeps drawing a straight line between mining and supply through the people standing around Orla. Glenda Harwood is the head miner's daughter, and she's also the former supply shadow that Orla replaced. Mike Davidson dated Glenda before he dated Orla. None of that proves Mike pulled the trigger, and honestly, this theory doesn't need him to be the killer at all. In a network this size, the person standing closest to the victim could just as easily be a courier, a lookout, or a complete dead end. What actually matters is that the show keeps building a human bridge between the department that stores the equipment and the department capable of physically moving it past the legal boundary. Now, let's talk about the radio, because this is where the theory stops being pure speculation and starts getting backed up by the show itself. The obvious problem with any inter-silo network is distance. A handheld radio shouldn't be able to punch a clean signal through that much rock and reinforced concrete between two separate structures. But the last few episodes already confirmed something significant here. Every silo runs on its own compartmentalized radio channel, and Silo 1 monitors every single frequency around the clock. Sit with what that fact actually implies. You don't build a surveillance system that thorough just to catch static. You build it because someone, at some point, proved that cross-silo contact was possible, and Silo 1 has been guarding against a repeat ever since. So when Walker discovers her radio can reach channels beyond the one everyone normally uses, I don't think we're heading toward a clean, dramatic conversation with a stranger in another silo. I think we're about to find something closer to a code, a supply count, or a scheduled burst meant for a specific listener. Existing traffic that's been quietly running below Silo 18 for years. Not a brand new signal Walker just happened to invent. And here's a fun scheduling detail for you. Episode 7, arriving August 14th, is literally titled Radio. I don't think that's a coincidence I'm reading into. I think that's the show telling us exactly where this thread is about to go next. There's a thematic echo worth pulling in here too. Up in the before times, Daniel and Helen keep circling a figure named Per Stenson, a tech billionaire and major advocate for AI control who also funded the clinic behind the memory erasure technology now running through the entire silo system. Stenson was reportedly aboard the ship the night Charlotte's fighter squadron was wiped out, when only a handful of jets equipped with old pre-digital communication gear were sent up. A deliberate test of whether an artificial intelligence could override human pilots entirely. Whether or not that test succeeded the way its architects wanted, the pattern is the same pattern running through the present-day silo system centuries later. Control the information, Control the memory. Control who is allowed to talk to whom. The horizontal network in the mines and the vertical secrecy enforced from Silo 1 are opposite responses to the exact same design philosophy. Let's zoom out, because I don't think this hidden network, if it's real, is the same thing as Juliet's alliance with Bernard and Sims. Juliet operates in the open. She believes the truth has to be seen to actually matter. A network built to survive by staying invisible plays by the opposite rule set entirely. It would have every reason to worry that Juliet's very public rebellion could expose the exact routes it depends on to function. It might not trust Bernard, who enforced the old order for years before any of this happened. It might not fully trust Sims either, even after he just spent an episode secretly keeping his old boss alive against a direct order from the very top. And after what happened to Orla, I doubt Juliet would be quick to trust a network that protects its secrecy by killing the people who get too close to it. That's a far more interesting conflict than two rebellions simply joining forces the moment they discover each other. This network can be necessary and still be guilty at the same time. It can be the only thing keeping other silos alive while quietly starving 18 in order to do it. Here's my falsifiable test, because a theory that can never be proven wrong isn't worth much to anyone. If the missing lights turn out to be one person's private stash with no route running through mining or construction, this whole theory falls apart. If Orla's murder gets fully explained by jealousy with zero connection to the inventory record she was chasing, same result. It falls apart. But if Billings and Hank's investigation this episode turns up a continuing chain of workers moving material past the legal mining boundary, the question stops being who stole the lights, and it becomes how many silos that supply chain is actually keeping alive right now. A few specific things I'm watching for as we head into the back half of this season. I want to see whether Ed Harwood knows more about that forbidden mining perimeter than his council complaint let on. I want to see whether Walker's newfound radio traffic turns out to be coded rather than conversational. And I want to see whether any silo currently written off as dead turns out to be running on equipment it never grew or manufactured itself. With Radio landing August 14th, Grey Goo arriving the week after that, and then Farewell and the season finale Troy closing everything out on September 4th, we've got exactly enough runway left to either confirm this theory piece by piece or watch it completely fall apart on camera. If you think I'm onto something here, or if you think I've completely lost the plot chasing red string across a corkboard, drop it in the comments, because I read every single one and I will absolutely argue with you about underground mining logistics in a fictional bunker at 10 at night. Subscribe if you want the next breakdown the moment radio actually airs, and I will see you back down in the tunnels.